Hey, Pastor Steve Waldron. I hope you're having a great day or night in Jesus. Cinematic Fate by William D. Romanowski from Calvin College. Now, thanks for being here. Join us daily. Share with your friends, family, church family. Those of you that watch the channel, you realize I do a fair amount of books on television, movies, and it's because I'm a holiness preacher and I'm against those things by and large. And so I'm constantly looking and mining things that show why I think biblically that's the correct view to have. You just sitting and watching a 2 or 3 hour movie is usually not the most productive portion of your time, especially with the various brainwashing that goes on or could possibly go on at that, the susceptibility, the propaganda measures going back to Hitler, and maybe even before that, Charlie Chaplin, on and on. A Christian perspective on movies and meanings. So I've been reading through this and it's just simply fascinating. Now, he's probably going to have a little bit of a different take than I do. I'm going to be more like in your Malcolm Muggeridge, that he saw through like the follies of television and the electronic golden calf and some of the more academic books from University of Vanderbilt and stuff on these various subjects. But it is fascinating, and how the worldview of the various directors, producers, and basically everybody involved in Hollywood does bleed through. I remember reading a book from the 1920s talking about Hollywood was the wood that witches traditionally made their wands out of. And before that, Hollywood and Beverly Hills, I think, actually would donate land. Anybody want to start a church there because they wanted it to be the city of angels. They wanted it to be a very Christian place. And of course, it ended up not that. Even in the 1920s, if you study the Hayes Code, like from 1931, 1932, Hayes, the Presbyterian minister, that just as America had shut down alcohol in the 1920s, they were shutting down the movies. And in the 1920s, the movies, not just in Weimar Germany, but here in the United States, had gotten so debased. Yes, the black and white silent movies were so terrible that they were getting shut down all across America, so they had to come up with certain standards. But even, was it 1938, John R. Rice wrote a book called What's Wrong with the Movies? It was absolutely fantastic, and a real takedown of the movies. So real Christians have always been against a bad tree is not going to produce good fruit. All that being said, this is going to go into how certain worldviews, I remember years ago, was it Reginald Showers? It was one of those guys. Maybe it was a Jewish Christian, but anyhow, Michael Medved, maybe it was that, but maybe Showers had that in the book too. They both wrote on the media, and he said like 88% of producers were atheists, and so obviously that's going to come through their worldview. You had the what was it, the Communist 10 or 11 back in the 1950s, and I was reading one of the Communist handbooks from that day, and they said, look, you can make an incredibly patriotic film, just give 5 minutes of even subterranean communist thought, and a little leaven's going to leaven the whole lump. The encyclopedists back in the 1700s in France kind of had the same way, Denis Diderot and de Lambert and Condorcet and that crew. And I remember before Ben Shapiro was Ben Shapiro, back 20 plus years ago, him writing and me reading how liberal Hollywood was, that even a show like the Waltons, which was supposed to be the ultimate of innocence, really was pushing FDR's New Deal, various things like that. And sometimes I've ran across like clips of something that I grew up with. I didn't grow up in church, television, Laverne and Shirley or something. And you realize, you're like, man, that was really lewd. And you just didn't know it at the time. I'm reading here film scholar Carl Plantinga. I'm wondering if that's related to Alvin Plantinga. And the Plantingas, they're all at Calvin College. So this is a book, not to go into your tediousness too much longer, that you may want to get in studying these various genres. It's a couple hundred pages. It's very small print, and which is good and bad. It means it's packed with information, but it also means it's small print. And it has good spacing, though, in between the lines, so it is readable. Places really to write also. And so it is fascinating to see the various things. I was listening to, was it Stanley Kubrick's daughter, talking about her dad's philosophical worldview, the things he would try to communicate through various films. And I'm just going to tell you, it's not a good genre. I was reading too, it's not a good way to communicate, in a sense, subterranean messages. It's like the Chronicles of Narnia. When I was lost, I would read The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe over and over and over, and I was always devastated about Aslan, but I never put two and two together about Jesus. And so I don't know how good it is, just the subtle hints drawing people over. Lewis's science fiction trilogy as well. If you know, you know, but if you don't know, you just think it's science fiction, I think, usually. And so you have to have your eyes enlightened by the power of the Holy Ghost. So, good stuff. We should just preach the word, not necessarily be subtle in all of our things. We speak the truth in love. So it is fascinating. And I kind of grew up in this world, my brother running the Atlanta Comics and Fantasy Fair. He's about 12 years older than I am. And, so as a young man, I was just surrounded by movies and sci-fi and actors and producers and Star Trek and Star Wars and your Stan Lees and all of these people. So God bless you. I'll talk with you later. Just live for God. Bye-bye.